welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and I am urging you, do not go out into the mist. Stay in place, and you will be fine. Rescue will come, I promise.
And I'm Matt Freeman, and I'm sure you'll be fine.
Who do you think people are going to listen to? It's the Matts of the world that people are going to listen to.
It's fine. It's just some mist.
This week on the show, it is another one of our patron-produced episodes. Folks who pledge to us at the Doof Warrior level or above on Patreon. That is patreon.com/doofmedia. Get to select a movie or a short story for us to do a show on. This week, our patron Byron Knuckles asked us to take a look at the 2007 Frank Darabont film titled The Mist. So we're going to be talking all about The Mist this week, Matt. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be a really, really fun one. So it will be full spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Mist, please go watch that movie. It's great. It's great.
Yes, it is.
Then we're going to circle back around to the results of our September Council of Doof vote. The results are in, and we're going to talk about them. And we will finish everything up with just a little bit of a mini segment on some of the movies you and I have been watching over the last couple of weeks. So that's our episode. That's it. That's all of it.
Sounds good.
All right, let's why don't we just jump right in to The Mist.
What's going on?
It's death.
Something in the mist! Shut the doors! Shut the doors!
The only way we're going to help ourselves is to seek rescue.
Tie this around your waist.
What for?
Well, let us know you got at least 300 feet.
There's nothing out there. Nothing in the mist.
What if you're wrong?
Then I guess the joke would be on me.
Matt, what is The Mist about?
A freak storm unleashes a species of bloodthirsty creatures on a small town where a small band of citizens hole up in a supermarket and fight for their lives.
That is very true.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a species. It's like several species.
Yeah.
But,
It's lots of different things. Yeah, this movie was written and directed by Frank Darabont, and it is based on the short story by the one and only Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first time since Carrie, I think, that we've covered something Stephen King adjacent, not on our Stephen King Dark Tower podcast, right?
Welcome those of you coming over from Kingslingers.
Yeah.
Those of you who don't know what we're talking about, we also do a Dark Tower podcast called Kingslingers, which we could probably stand to mention more often.
Yeah, we should do that. Why are we so bad at marketing ourselves?
You get into a groove, Scott. Yeah,
That's true.
I mean, I think that's probably a good place to contextualize. Is like I'm so like up to my eyeballs in Stephen King that I think it's going to be hard for me to not make some like Dark Tower references or to talk about Stephen King in the abstract as we talk about this movie, just because we talk about Stephen King so much.
I would expect nothing less, Matt. Yeah. So let's just start at the beginning, though. What were your overall thoughts on this movie? You had not seen this movie before this moment, right?
I had not seen it, and I really liked it. I thought it sort of immediately, I think, became one of my favorite horror movies, actually, and that's, I have to admit, in part because I don't watch a lot of horror movies because they're scary, and that's unpleasant. But I found this one to be like, it was everything it was supposed to be, but it didn't lean on any of the on too many of the horror things that I dislike. Like, it wasn't really torture porn. It wasn't over reliant on jump scares. Mm-hmm. It was just very intense, very dramatic, psychologically complex and thrilling, and then it leaves you broken, which is a good movie.
Yeah. I think the best place to actually start this entire conversation, Matt, is the end, because probably. I think that's the thing that I think most people know about this movie, and I agree with your assessment. I mean, I really, really enjoyed this movie the first time I saw it all those years ago, and I loved it again on my rewatch. There's something about Frank Darabont that just gets Stephen King and just adapts Stephen King in a way that few other filmmakers do. He's adapted some of his best stuff, and the Stephen King adaptations are pretty mixed overall. And some people say the closer it is to the book, the worse it is. Like I think The Shining is a book that is completely different from Kubrick's movie. But this is actually a short story and a movie that are pretty similar overall, with one huge exception, which is the end of the story.
Yeah.
Which is a hell of an ending. It is the most monstrously cruel thing I think a filmmaker can do to his characters.
And by extension to his audience, because you're rooting for them. And like in this sort of movie, in a sort of like, you call it a mixture of a disaster movie and like a horror movie, you're rooting for the characters, and you kind of know, like there's certain tropes, right? There's certain tropes of like who's going to live and who's not going to live. And this movie just throws all that directly in the trash, and if anything, uses it as a weapon to stab you in the heart, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. For those that maybe don't know, oh gosh, why are you listening to this right now? Go watch this movie. But if you don't know, final warning, the end of this movie is 5 of our characters make it out of the supermarket they've been holed up in the entire movie. They're driving down the road. The mist is everywhere. There's monsters everywhere. And then they run out of gas, and there's no hope. And they have one gun with 4 bullets in it, and our main character shoots everyone else in this car, including his 10-year-old son. But he didn't have a bullet for himself. And so he opens the door to the car, stands outside, and waits for the monsters to come kill him. But what happens? The mist clears, and the army is there to rescue them. And so if he had just waited a couple more minutes, they would have all been rescued. And the movie ends with him screaming at the top of his lungs and fading out.
Just completely shattered. And oh my God, Jesus Christ, Scott.
It's brutal. I mean, as someone who doesn't have kids yet, it's brutal for me. I can't imagine you as a father, probably putting your kids in the position of his kid, and putting yourself in the position of Thomas Jane's character here. And oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's completely true that after you have kids, all of the like kids stuff in movies works on you 10 times as hard, including this. I mean, I hadn't seen it before, but I was broken up by this. It was great. I mean, it's rare. I think it's fair to say that it's rare that a movie affects me as much as this ending affected me.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's a departure from the short story. The short story just kind of ends with them in the car driving into the distance. They hear that there's like hope possibly in Hartford, so they're heading towards Hartford, and they're not sure if they're going to have enough gas to make it there. And that's kind of where the short story ends, with uncertainty. You don't know. It seems kind of hopeless, but you're not totally sure. And Stephen King actually liked this ending so much, he said that if he had thought of it, that's how he would have ended it. Like, he loved it. And as has been pointed out to me in the past, Stephen King is usually very, very kind to the adaptations of his stories. He usually says very nice things about them, but I don't think he's ever said like, I wish I had thought of it, and I'm mad that I didn't think of it, because it's so perfect.
Yeah. That's cool. I think as a writer, he's probably able to be like, yeah, I mean, my ending was like, but there's going to be hope, but it's a vague hope.
Maybe,
but this is like, this is obviously a notorious, right? It's like a notoriously gut wrenching ending, and I think it's interesting. I was thinking about this afterward. I'm not sure. I haven't had enough time to process, maybe, but I was like, does this ending fit in with the themes of the story better or not as well as the original ending? Because the movie itself, the story itself, is about conflict between groups of people. It's about, the flawed nature of humanity. It's about that more than it's about the monsters. And so I guess you could say having an ending where, like, in a sense, yet again, it's the flawed nature of humanity that dooms itself.
Yeah.
You could pull it that way, I guess.
I think so. I mean, I think this is a movie about what fear does to people. And this is a movie in which the ending is these people are so afraid, so terrified, so uncertain that a father is able to pull out a gun and shoot his son in the head. Something that, you and I were kind of talking about this today, and we were kind of pondering, I don't know how I would ever be able to do that. Like, I don't know. Like, what would it take for me? And the way Darabont shoots this fucking scene where like the kid wakes up as it's happening, right? And we don't actually even see Thomas Jane take out. I mean, we see him take out the gun, but we don't actually even see him point the gun at his son. It's like all just a close up on his son's face, and we know what's happening. And you like in the kid's eyes, you see the fear and the confusion. And then we go to a wide shot of the car as just 4 bullets go off, and it's just torturous. It's just awful. And it's like, how could someone do that? How could a father ever do that? And the answer is fear. The answer is that as Thomas Jane says in this movie, when we're people are good and civilized as long as there are rules and bumpers, and society and civilization holds itself up, and you take all these things away and we just collapse into animals, and who knows what fear can do to a person.
Yeah. And he, he's been sleep deprived for several days. He's been terrorized by these repeated traumatic events.
Yeah, his wife is dead.
He's just learned his wife is dead on top of all of that. And he's just completely hopeless. Like there's no sign at any point that there is any hope. And like, that's the thing is when we were talking about it, I was like, yeah, there's no way in a million years I would ever do that. However, you can never actually say what you would do if you were pushed to an extremity beyond where you've ever been pushed before.
Right.
So it's very, kind of hot air to just say what you would and would not ever do when you've never been pushed that far. And that's what's, if anything, that's what's so disturbing about the movie is you want to just be able to say to yourself, I would hold out hope. I would have done anything other than that. I would have run out into the mist on foot before I did that. And it's like, yeah, but you weren't actually in that situation. You weren't actually dealing with that for days. Yeah, I mean, that's the true horror of the story. And I do think it's hilarious that there are two actors in this movie that are people that ended up being very big characters on The Walking Dead. Laurie Holden, who plays the woman, Amanda Dunphy, who is the woman who's taking care of his son that's in the car with him at the end. And then the one short-haired woman who has her kids at home is also an actress from The Walking Dead who plays Carol in The Walking Dead. And I think it's so funny that, like, in The Walking Dead, the big thing was, like, The Walking Dead is us. And in this movie, it's the monster. Who are the monsters? The ones outside or the ones inside? And I think one of the big strengths of this movie is there are so many different characters in the story all reacting to this thing differently. And it kind of forces you, the viewer, to go, okay, who would I be in this situation? Which way would be the way I react? Would I be like Andre Braugher's character who just like refuses to accept it, who says, this must be a prank. I refuse to accept it. There's no way. You have offered to show me the evidence in the back of the room. Like, there's a tentacle back there. Come look at it. No, I'm not going to do that. Would I be? Probably I would not be like Mrs. Carmody, who turns this into a big like biblical illusion and goes kind of crazy. You want to think you'd be like Thomas Jane, who like tries to keep his head straight and tries to do the right thing. But you see characters like, I love that we see characters go from one extreme to the other. Like William Sadler's character is a guy that was on the team of the good guys, the ones we liked throughout most of this movie. And we see him get converted to this religious extremism because of what he witnesses. And I think that's so fascinating. And it's because we have this wide cast of characters that we get to kind of look at them and wonder, okay, who am I? Who am I out of this? I love that. Yeah. And I think one thing I really like about the way the movie does things is Thomas Jane's character. He's clearly the hero. He's clearly the guy we're supposed to relate to. And, it's not that he isn't heroic, but the movie is pretty clear that everything he does is pointless.
Yeah.
Like he takes this big risky mission. This is one example, okay, but he takes this big risky mission to go get the antibiotics and painkillers from the pharmacy. They lose, I think, 2 people doing that at least, and then the person who the drugs were for dies anyway.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of thing that happens over and over, where it's like he's actually being brave, he's being decisive, and he's being a leader, and yet his decisions are almost always leading to more death. I mean, the movie doesn't really tell us whether or not the people in the supermarket were rescued, but I almost like when the truck drove by at the end, I was almost like, oh, it's going to be everybody from the supermarket. It's going to be like, oh, you should have just stayed in place and done nothing, and you would have been fine. The movie didn't go that far, but I think the point is, like, even it's like, yeah. So all of this is to say, like, just because you are in a bad situation and you feel like, well, I have to do something. Well, like, saying you have to do something, that's not necessarily the smart thing to do in an emergency situation either. That's like, stay in the fucking life raft. Like, like don't, there's a reason "don't be a hero" is a phrase, right? It's like, I don't know. I thought it was interesting how you're obviously supposed to think he's awesome, but at the same time, all of his choices are sort of zero sum in the end.
He also, he obviously cares about his kid and wants to protect his kid, but his kid is like a very minor. It's not that he's a minor concern. He's just like not hanging around with this kid very often, right? Like, he's pawned his kid off on these other women pretty consistently. You deal with this kid while I, the man, will go try to do my manly things. That's kind of his default attitude. And he comes back to the kid a couple times, but he always is like, nope, gotta go later. I think that's really interesting too. No, I mean, I think you're right. And I wonder, you could make some arguments that some of the choices he did make just gave ammunition to Mrs. Carmody and her nut job, religious faction. You lead a group outside of the store by force, and she's the one telling you, you're going to get punished for this. God is going to punish you for this. And then they come back a couple minutes later. 2 of them are dead. They've been attacked, and they're traumatized and horrified. And everyone else in the thing is like, oh shit, she was right. Look at that. And that's what leads these random people to stab a completely innocent private in the army in the stomach multiple times, and then fucking crucify him and sacrifice him to these monsters. It's an incredibly cruel, awful thing that happens to poor Sam Witwer. It's awful.
Yeah, that was a intense scene. Like, I knew some things about this movie going into it. I was pretty shocked by that whole the way that whole scene unfolded, where they just murder him, and it's so believable. Like, that's the sickening thing about it is, that's what I love about genre. We've talked about this a lot, where the monsters are great. I love the monsters. We got to talk about the monsters, but the point of the monsters is to give a space for this very realistic, chilling story about the way humans would totally behave in the situation. Yeah,
and the speed at which they get to that point, I think, is pretty remarkable too. Like, it's just very quickly that we go to this point, and like, I mean, even when Ollie murders Miss Carmody, there's something there that you feel like good, because you're like happy that this crazy nut job that's been riling everyone up is dead, but also you're like, Jesus, dude, like, you just shot her in the head. Like, you were a clerk at a grocery store yesterday, and now you just shot a woman in the head because she wouldn't shut up. It's like, holy crap.
He's my favorite character in the movie, actually, because
Ollie.
like, it's such an interesting, like, I think I would be the Ollie in the situation. Where like, and I don't mean that in like I'd be awesome. I mean, like, I would probably find myself justifying like anything that led to my survival pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like you said, you're sort of satisfied, but like, obviously once he does it, he seems to immediately realize that he's crossed the line.
Yeah,
because like,
because,
you see in his face that he's like, oh, I can't come back from that, you know?
yeah, I mean, like, it's killing a human being. Like, I just don't know. I'm very lucky in my life that I've never been in a situation where that was even a choice that I had to make. But like, I don't think you can. I think that does something to you. I really does. I really do. I really do think it does something to you.
Yeah.
Crossing that line. And I think, yeah, Ollie gets there, and almost immediately after that is killed. Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, I liked the writing of the exchange where he does it, and then main character man says, "Thank you, Ollie," and then he says like, "I wouldn't have done that if I didn't absolutely have to," which is like showing how he's already struggling with it and trying to justify himself, and then hero man says, "That's why I said thank you." but like nobody, in a sense, like the movie punishes him for that, right? That's his immediate death after this. So
yeah, definitely. I did want to kind of circle back around. You know, you talked about that truck that drives by at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do see the woman from the beginning on that truck with her children, right? And so this is an interesting commentary as well, because this is a woman who is like, right after the mist comes, she's like, help me, someone help me, I need to go get my kids, won't anyone help me? And everyone in the store is like selfishly like, no. And even our hero David says, come on lady, we got our own kids to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And she at the end is with her children driving to safety, where everyone else has lost. Thomas Jane shot his kid in the head.
Yeah. Yeah, what is that saying exactly?
I don't know. I mean, I guess like it is interesting how quickly everything broke down into factions, right? Like even I love that there's this line where Andre Braugher's character is like, you're riling up some of my people. And one of the person's reaction is, what do you mean you're people? We're all just people. But that wasn't true. Like, they immediately break into cliques and factions and groups, and it's, I need to worry about mine and me and mine, and I don't care about the group people as a whole. And it seems like the movie punishes that kind of behavior.
Yeah. I mean, to cross podcast for a moment, I think that I'm just going to look up, what's the main character man's name?
David Drayton.
David or Thomas Jane, either one. If
Thomas Jane is the actor's name.
If David Drayton had been a gunslinger, he would have gone with the woman.
Sure. Yeah.
If he had been,
he would have said, "Do you seek aid and succor?"
Exactly. And he would, and she would have said yes, and then he would have gone with her, and then maybe he would have lived. But because our main character, I mean, it's the most understandable selfishness in the world.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But also, the movie clearly punished him in the worst way for that. So
yeah, I mean, it's such an amazing. I actually like. We've been talking about the story a lot. I want to kind of talk about the visuals and how they convey things too. And I think a great way to get into this is the moment in which the mist hits the store for the first time, and the confusion and fear that this beautiful effect brings as a character rushes into the store and says, "There's things out there. There's things out there." And then the mist hits, and everyone panics. And it is like we were talking about before, the quickness at which everything breaks down, because like at this point, nobody actually knows that there's things out there, right? You have just like one crazed guy with a little blood on him saying there's things out there, you can't go out there. And you have a woman saying, help me get to my children. My 10-year-old is watching my younger child. Or my 8-year-old, Jesus, I need to get home to these people. And nobody knows what the danger is or what's out there. But yeah, already it's like, I got mine. Already it's like, I'm going to watch out for number one, and that's it. And it like, I think the visual effect of the mist and why King decided to make it mist and why it's such a wonderful idea is that like it's so just immediately terrifying because you can't see anything. It's just this beautiful, scary effect that like you don't even need to see the monsters, and it's a while before we do see them.
Yeah. That was perfect. I thought the look of, I mean, we can talk about the visuals now. I think that just the look of the mist itself is so good. It's just this, it's like unrealistically supernaturally thick, but in a perfect way where you're just like, oh, you just can't see into it at all. And that's it's so scary that way. Like you can so easily imagine yourself being in such a thick mist that you can't see more than like 10 feet away, and it's completely silent and sound deadening, and you have no idea what could be right there.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it like when we see it in the middle of broad daylight at the very beginning of the movie, where they see it kind of coming down the mountain, right? And it is otherworldly even then. Even it's bright out, you can still see the sun, but you see this encroaching mist, and there's something not right about it. It's just wrong. And the character's dialogue confirms that by saying it's like it doesn't make sense for it to come down the mountain this way. Like that doesn't make sense. But also the visual itself, the otherworldly look of it really enforces that. And then I think my favorite is when they first raise the gate in the back, right? And there's this clear delineation where like it almost just stops, right? It doesn't immediately crash into the place when you open the thing. The mist doesn't immediately start filling up the back. It just kind of stops there. And it makes it even more creepy and otherworldly, because it's like, why wouldn't normal mist just like fill the empty space and just start filling up the space? No, not this. It just stops there. Oh, it's so creepy.
Yeah. So I love the mist, and then basically there's like 3 to 5 distinct sequences, like action sequences in the movie, and I think they all work really great. I don't want to say it's my favorite thing about the movie because there's so much to like about it, but I was actually I was sort of surprised that I'd never heard how kind of fun and awesomely done these were. Like, so the first one is obviously the tentacle monster trying to get the kid through the rear door of the loading dock, which I think is done pretty well. That like honestly, I think that's probably the least well executed of them, and it's still good. It's still fine. It's the first time you see the monster. I guess I just thought like the physics of how the tentacles worked. I was like, I don't know if my brain accepts this as real, but I think everything else
Matt.
was. I know. I think everything else was great. I think my favorite sequence was either the time when the pterodactyls get into the building, and it's sort of like a comedy of errors where they've set up these buckets full of I don't know, kerosene or something with mops in them that they're planning to use as weapons. And then like just nothing works. Like they can't get the mops lit. And then the one guy, when he gets his mop lit, he kicks over the bucket and so douses himself completely in kerosene, and it starts to burn everything up. And it's just like nothing is working right. Everyone's best efforts and clever schemes are going completely awry. It's just chaos. It's pure chaos, but it's shot so well where you're easily following what's happening, and you're following these 2 pterodactyls around the room. So I think that's probably my favorite. My second favorite, I guess, would be the spiders in the pharmacy.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's just something visceral to these giant fucking bugs just hitting the glass, and the thunk and the silence of just like the thunk, thunk, thunk as they're just landing on the glass. Oh, that's such a powerful, powerful thing.
Yeah. Speaking of, everyone damning themselves, like when they're standing at the window shining their lights on the bugs, my first thought was like, the bugs are coming to the lights. Get away from the window, like you fools.
Yeah.
But even our main character is oblivious to that, and I don't know. I thought that was good.
I mean, I think it just shows the panic, right? Like, and I love the one guy that just runs around the entire store turning the lights on, and even they're like, oh wait, they're attracted to light, shit, and by then it's too late, and it's just like, should I turn them off? And it's like, no, because they're inside now, and we need to be able to see, and it's just like it's amazing how quickly it collapses. It's really incredible.
Yeah.
And just like the guy who's trying to desperately light the broom and then trips and lights himself on fire. It's just like everything just collapses.
Yeah. That whole sequence is great. Again, the spider, like the idea of the spiders that cocoon people and then stuff bursts out of them while they're alive. Horrifying. And then,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
And then like you see that like everywhere they go, there's people cocooned. And then of course there's just like the giant ones, which are, awesome and Lovecraftian. And
yeah.
I don't know. I guess the reason I'm talking so much about that is I felt like I should have heard more about that. Like it was so much cooler than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of what lends to this is just the overall style of the film, which is like it's very handheld. It's not entirely shaky cam, but it is kind of like, it's not documentary style, but it's just like this. It's a very rough kind of guerrilla style of filmmaking where we're moving around a lot. The camera's not shaky, but it's like we're in a lot of close-ups where the camera is right up in there with the people. Even from the very beginning, like even before all the shit broke down, it's just this very like the lighting is pretty flat even before the mist comes and fucks it all up. It's a very interesting choice. I read that the cinematographer on this movie had done a cop show in the past, and it does seem kind of like those life on the streets type cop shows where you just got the camera crew following you around as you do your thing. That's what it felt like to me. And I really think that gives something to it because it makes it feel a little bit realer. It makes it feel a little bit more authentic.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, definitely during the action sequences, I feel like the camera is always like at eye level. Mm-hmm. Rarely is the camera like higher looking down from a perspective where you wouldn't actually have. And I think the effect maybe is that, the camera is either stationary or moving around at a walking pace at eye level. Mm-hmm. And it makes you feel like you are one of the people in this room looking around, seeing this stuff happen around you on some level.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. It's so cool. I like it a lot. It feels authentic. It feels like, and look, I'm going to be honest with you that I don't think some of the CG effects of the monsters have held up as much. Like I think especially with the ones flying around, like you can kind of tell, like I was being unfair to myself and like looking forward a little bit here, but like you can kind of tell that like, when she's swatting at this thing, like she's not actually swatting at it, and they're like trying to line everything up perfectly, but it doesn't just quite mesh. Mm-hmm. But it's, it's 13 years ago. Things have gotten better since then. But I think the guerrilla style type filmmaking enhances that because it, like the movie feels so real that even when those kind of approach the point at me where I'm like, that seems a little fake, I don't care as much because everything else feels so real to me.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't think anything in that scene bothered me visually. I think it was the tentacle scene that bothered me because I was just like, why wouldn't it just? I don't know. My brain didn't accept that one. It accepted everything else pretty completely easily.
Sure.
So,
yeah. I mean, I think the tentacles always have to kind of behave weirdly to make it so they don't just like immediately grab everyone and kill them.
Yeah, that was I think that was basically my problem. Is I was like, all it would need to do would be just like thrash around the tentacles, and it would just bludgeon everyone at the very least.
Sure, yeah.
But instead, it's like allowing them to slowly hack through it with an axe. Anyway, mm-hmm. Minor complaint ultimately.
Sure.
I really, that's almost like the end of my complaints about the movie is like there was one scene where I didn't quite believe the CGI, which it surprised me how low like the kind of meta, Rotten Tomatoes type scores were for this movie because I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, I think monster movies in particular just end up doing like low scores, It just like we don't take these type of movies as serious. But I mean, I want to talk about religion a little bit with you, Matt.
All right.
Because I mean, this is something we've talked about in our Stephen King podcast quite a bit. We've talked about King and his view on religion, and this is something we see again and again. The more King stories you read, the more you'll see this. We saw it in Carrie, the kind of religious nut. We see it again here. And I do think it's really interesting because, Stephen King is the type of person who does not call himself religious, says he believes in something, just doesn't really hold to like a specific religion, a specific dogma rather. And I think it's interesting. One of the things he really likes to do, and one of the things that I think that this story does so well, is explore the idea of, okay, how are these beliefs abused and manipulated to control people, right? And that's one of the things he gets really into. And then we have this character here who represents that to this horrible degree, where she immediately seizes upon this as a moment of religious significance to control her people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically, she's a very flawed person who is using religion as a weapon or as a tool to cover for her own fears and insecurities, and not using it to actually help people, not using it to actually guide her to make better choices, and I think someone who is also being poisoned by a particularly bad dogma. I mean, it's definitely. I guess it is a really big part of the movie, and it's not a part that I don't. It's not like it doesn't work for me. Like I wouldn't say like, oh, none of the religion stuff worked for me. It's just like I guess I wasn't interested in it personally.
Sure. Okay.
But I mean, we can still talk about it. I just like as I was watching the movie, I was much less into that whole thread of the plot and more into just like the more general, the worst monster here is man. And in this particular instance, it just happens to be religious fanaticism that's being used by one of the parties involved.
Sure. I mean, there is like the fact that it's religious almost doesn't matter in that regard, right? It's just another method. It's more how these people, like at the very beginning, I love that at the very beginning of this movie, or right when the mist comes, she's preaching all this stuff, and like everyone is like, this is nonsense. Like everyone is like, this is stupid nonsense. Come on, you're being ridiculous. And how quickly everyone is just not only listening to her and not only buying into her bullshit, but actively participating it into a point. And I love, there's this moment that Darabont does such a good job here. There's a moment when the people stab the private that cuts to Mrs. Carmody, and she has this look of horror on her face. Almost this brief realization that I've done this. Like, look what I spurred on these people. Like, look, I lit these people into a frenzy, and then they did this thing, and I am horrified by this. And then that quickly fades away, and then she's encouraging it and pushing it on. And it's so fascinating. And like it's almost as if their humanity is there, pushing at them and trying to get to the surface, but their fear just keep pushing it down. And it was a fantastic performance. Marcia Gay Harden is the actress, and she's been in quite a few things, but she's spectacular in this movie.
Yeah, I love that moment. There's so many little tiny details, and that's one of the main things I wanted to say about this movie is there's so many characters. I don't even remember their names, but that's fine because I remember who they are and what their deal is. Mm-hmm. And hers, like the movie really does successfully tell many, many little stories across many, many characters, and you totally keep track. Like you said, that one shot where the guy gets stabbed, you see the look of horror on her face as she realizes, like, oh my God, this is like definitely gone too far. This is out of my control. This is not what I wanted to happen. But then I think exactly like you said, this is a movie about fear, and so she just rolls with it basically because she's like, well, I don't have any other options at this point. I guess we're sacrificing him, and then kind of you can see that she is. Not only does she become okay with it, but then that kind of resets her status quo at that point.
Yeah. And then it becomes like, we're going to do this once a day. Like, this is like, the beast will not come today because of what we did here. Mm-hmm. And so tomorrow we'll see. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, it's just, it's such a negative view of people. Mm-hmm. Like, it really is. This is a really pessimistic view of humanity. But I think it's right. Like, we haven't talked much about Brent Norton and Andre Braugher's character, who Andre Braugher is like one of my favorite actors ever. He's so good. His voice, the way he carries himself, the way he enunciates, like, I love him always. And he's like the perfect character for this guy who can just bring people around him and try to keep them calm and try to just ignore rational thought at this point and just be like, no, like, this is stupid. He's great. He's so great in this movie. And I kind of, my only real complaint about the story is that he leaves it so soon. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to get to see more of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, I mean, I agree. I think the movie is already juggling so many balls that I guess you could make the argument that it literally couldn't have also handled him in addition to everything else it was doing. But yeah, I think he's another great archetype where now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know if I would have been Ollie or if I would have been someone like him, where I'm just like, I fixate on the problem as I see it, because I think this is like a flaw of mine, is like, I decide what the problem is, and then if new data comes in that contradicts my view of what the problem is, it's very annoying to me, because I'm like, I'm already working on the problem that I think I'm solving, which is that we need to get we need to go find someone to help us. And I'm going to do that. And this new information about the tentacle monster does not fit in with my plan. So I'm going to ignore it for now. That's the sort of flaw that I tend to make.
Sure.
But yeah, I get like his performance is great, and he's such a great part of the movie. I was wondering if he was going to show up at the end there, actually. But no.
Nah, he's dead.
He's dead. Yeah, definitely.
Dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I love how he represents like there is, you know, the Stephen King. So there's this small town mentality here, and he represents the outsider to that. And he's so conscious and aware of it that it informs the rational decisions he's trying to make there, right? It's like this has to be a dodge or a hustle or you guys just making fun of me because I'm the outsider that you all resent. And it's like so much of the outside world is being brought into this specific conflict with David. And that is, I think, a totally human thing to do, right? That's like, even in the midst of this disaster situation, like, it can't possibly be what you're saying it is because you don't like me.
Yeah. Because this is because I sued you over the right. It's
right.
It's like
exactly.
no. I really do love that whole sequence where they're all like actually very heroically, calmly being like, no, really, that's really not what this is. Just please come back into the back with us. And
I mean, it's like 5 feet away. There's a fucking tentacle. Like, you could just come look at it.
Yeah.
No, I won't do that. I won't do it. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah,
it really is.
And the movie balances so many things because you are annoyed with him for that, but also, like you said, you can so easily imagine yourself in that position where you would really be that bullheaded and that irrational about it. If you were afraid and if you felt like you were, being persecuted, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and like, we're not in a movie, so like, if I'm hanging out with you at a grocery store and like a fog comes and then you're like, there's a fucking tentacle monster in the back of the store, I mean, I might actually go check with you, but I'm not going to believe you at first. Like, who would believe that? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's because like you said, there's no real indication other than the one guy saying that there was something in the mist. There's no real indication that it's supernatural, and it's absurd. It's ridiculous.
Like, how I wonder, like, just realistically in our lives, if there was ever anything supernatural that happened to us, how much convincing would we need to jump to, okay, this is supernatural? Like, I feel like it would be a lot. Like, I think we make fun of characters in movies sometimes. We're like, oh, why didn't you believe them? And it's like, well, because, like, I don't know. I don't think there are giant, dimension crossing monsters that are just going to come invade my town.
Right. I mean, honestly, like, I have at least one close friend who will occasionally come to me with stories of creepy supernatural things that either happened to them or someone close to them, and it's like a gimmick between me and them that I then I take a few minutes to think about it, and then, like Encyclopedia Brown, I tell them what actually happened, and then they're usually like, fuck, that is what actually happened. Or at the very least, they're like, okay, well, that is a plausible enough explanation. But that's the kind of person I am. Yeah, I would just be like, it would take something pretty extreme to convince me that it was supernatural, and I'd probably be eaten by the monster by that point. So,
yes, I think we'd both be eaten by this monster, or shot with acid spider webs, or what one of the 10 other ways these people die horribly.
The acid spider webs are so great because when they start shooting the webs, you're like, oh, they're going to get stuck with the webs, and then they're going to be caught. and then you realize it's like powerful acid that immediately, and you're like, oh my god, this is so much worse than it seemed like it was.
Oh my god, it's so good. What a fun idea. What a fun idea.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about here? I guess like we could talk about the fun Dark Tower connection a little bit.
Oh, that made me smile so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's sort of a couple of Dark Tower connections, one of which is the poster at the very beginning of the movie.
Yes, there is Roland the gunslinger being painted. And you know, David is a movie poster artist. That is his job. He paints movie posters because there's a poster of The Thing on his wall as well. Are they saying that he made the Thing poster or he just really likes the Thing? I don't know. But there's in the world of this movie, there is a Dark Tower film that was created that he's doing the poster for.
Right, which makes perfect sense if you've read half of the Dark Tower. I mean, honestly, I think the movie is being cute by putting the Thing on there because I think it's like, look, another Lovecraft influence thing. And then, I mean, it's not necessarily Lovecraft, but like later, when he goes to the pharmacy, he tells his son he's going to get him some comic books. The only comic book he grabs is Hellboy.
That's
which. Good. Yeah, like so the movie's just being cute with its references and its call outs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Dark Tower poster. I smile. I think I immediately texted you like, oh, so this movie was made by Stephen King fans, obviously.
yes, absolutely.
And then of course the whole idea that the monsters come through a door between worlds.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing we haven't actually talked about here because it just doesn't really matter to what the movie's doing is like that. This Arrow project has unlocked a portal between worlds, and that's what these monsters have come through. And
you have to wonder if there's not some sort of business relationship with North Central Positronics.
I don't know, Matt. I don't know. Maybe once we're finished with the Dark Tower, we can return to this.
Yeah.
But just a really fun movie overall. Like I just really, really enjoyed it. I mean, we haven't talked. Like I love the grocery store set with the. It feels so real with the wall of glass in the front. You know, it just like I don't know. I think I read the short story before I saw the film, and I just this is exactly what I imagined it as. Like this giant wall of glass. It's like it forces you to look out into it even though you can't see, but it also is like the most fragile thing separating you and these monsters outside. I think it's really perfect.
It's so great. So great. I love how many of Stephen King's stories you can kind of just imagine that one day he was at the supermarket and it was a really cloudy, foggy day and he looked outside and he was like, what if? And then he went home and wrote a novella about it. That's literally 8 hours.
That's literally what happened.
Is it?
Yes. He went to a market, and there wasn't a storm, but he went to a market, and he looked at the front, the glass in front, and he was like, "What if there were giant insects that landed on that? Like the scene where the dunk 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 as they're landing. That is where he got the idea of it, and then he's just like brought the rest of it into it.
Damn, yeah,
it's really great. It's really great, and I'm pretty sure the game Silent Hill took inspiration from this story. Which is cool.
I can see that. It's
misty.
Yeah, it's sort of related without feeling like a ripoff. I like that.
Sure.
I think the one thing that stood out about the movie that I haven't really mentioned specifically is just the tone or the feeling of the whole movie is very. It's just eerie and pervasive and really powerful in a way where you're creeped out. Like I said I don't watch horror movies because they're scary, but like usually a horror movie is scary in just kind of a like, oh, it's scary because I'm being manipulated to be worried that something is going to jump out at me, right? But like this is just a much more eerie, creepy. Like I don't think there were many points in the movie where I was on edge because I expected a jump scare. I think it was just like, oh, this is just such a creepy, uncomfortable situation for all sorts of reasons. And I thought it was really successful at that, and I loved it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm not jump scares work on me, but I'm not a huge jump scare person. And it really did not employ it at all.
Yeah, I mean, even the places where it sort of could, right? Like even when they're in the pharmacy and the spiders come out, it's not really a jump scare. It's it's the in fact the movie lets you know that they're there before it shows them.
Sure.
So yeah.
Damn, all the eyes on these creatures, like it gave them
A face.
Yeah, it gave them a face. Like they're bugs, but also they have a little bit of a recognizable face.
Yeah, almost everything has a skull. Actually, I think even more than a face, it's they have like visible teeth and two eyes. The bugs do. The spiders do. I think even one of the giant things, like it sort of still had it. It was just sort of like tucked under its shoulder area, so it was harder to see. But yeah, I think that was maybe an idea with the design of these things, was like put a skull somewhere in their design.
That's great. It's great. All right, well, that is The Mist. Unless you had anything else, Matt. It's such a fun movie. Really liked it.
Yeah, I recommend this if you haven't seen it.
And I recommend the short story as well. Obviously, it goes a lot more into the internal mind of a lot of these characters, as books can often do, and it's quite good as well.
Cool.
All right, Matt. Let's talk about our Council of Doof. So a couple weeks ago, not last week because we had a kind of a pre-recorded episode we slot in there, but a couple weeks ago, we talked about the anime racing movie Redline, and we put it up for a vote to our community. Should Redline be entered into the canon of films, whatever nebulous idea we're giving this? You and I both said yes, but the listeners said no. By a voting percentage of 53 to 47%, our listeners were not interested in holding up Redline as one of the greatest films ever.
Yeah.
A little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, 47% still thought that it should.
Mm-hmm. It was very close, yeah.
Yeah, I think there were just some indications that people were just like, this is not so amazing that it goes on the list of the best things ever.
Yeah.
And I guess, everybody has their own threshold, right?
Sure. I mean, this, as you said, this was very much like a 14-year-old, like, fantasy, right? And there were definitely some people out there that were like, yeah, okay, I get that. That's not really the type of movie I want on a list of best films. And I get that. As someone who is a former 14-year-old boy, it was exactly the kind of thing I would love to have on a list. But I get that.
I think for me it was like, but it's the best executed 14-year-old boy's fantasy I've ever seen in my life. And that's got to count for something. And I think the 47% voting for indicate like, yeah, it does count for something, but I think enough people felt like, maybe we don't need to enshrine that sort of thing.
Sure. And that's fine. Yeah. We do appreciate everyone's feedback and letting us know why they did and did not vote for it. But at the end of the day, it is your decision, and you collectively have said no to Redline. So only one anime in the canon. There we go.
Yep. One thing that we are going to do, and that we did before for the Kryptonian collection, is sort of collect all of the losers of the of the Council of Doof series onto a list of the the Minority Report page, as it were. We're gonna write about the other side, the people who thought that this movie was good, actually.
Yeah. We used to do like a little blurb for, yes, this movie is great, and here's all the reasons why, and here's a link to the episode, and then we would have a little blurb that we called the Minority Report for the ones that didn't quite make it. And yeah, we want to bring that back because that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. All right, so tune in not next week, a couple weeks from now, when we're going to be doing another Council of Doof episode with another movie, and you will have a chance to vote again on that movie. So thank you to all of our patrons who are nominating these movies every month, and thank you to all of you guys who participated in the vote. Doof. All right, Matt, let's wrap everything up with a little bit of what we've been watching. I feel like there's been a lot of movies that have come out in the last few weeks. Not, of course, to theaters, because I'm still not going to those, but on VOD, on streaming services that we've been watching. So we're gonna talk about some of them real quick. I think the only one that both you and I can talk about collectively is the Disney Plus movie Mulan. Mm-hmm. We paid money for this. We paid $30, you and I,
That's right.
so we could see this movie. And Matt, What'd you think? What'd you think of Mulan?
It's okay. I mean, I don't even know if it was okay. Actually, I mean, it was pretty. I think that the way I usually judge these sorts of things, where it's made for kids, is like, well, did my kids watch it when I showed it to them? And the answer is no, they did not. They were bored. They did other things. They were just not interested at all. Mm-hmm. Even though they actually like Mulan, the movie, the actual movie. So, that's 2 thumbs down from my household.
I do think this is like my least favorite of the live action movies that I've seen. My caveat here is that I still haven't actually watched The Lion King somehow. That one yet. I just can't can't make the effort to actually sit down and watch the Lion King remake. As I've said to you, and I think we did a whole show on this, I'm pretty overall positive about these live action remakes, much more positive than it seems like the general population is. I thought Aladdin was great. I really liked that movie. And most people didn't. I think this is such an interesting movie because on the one hand, they've tried very hard to make it not just a retooling or a remake of the Disney movie or the animation, right? Like it doesn't have any songs in it. Doesn't have any of the pet creatures, like the sidekicks. I mean, there's a phoenix, but that's not really the same thing. It is nothing. Trying to be like a Chinese wuxia martial arts movie, in the vein of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. In fact, it is kind of just Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon a little bit. But obviously not as good because that's just one of the greatest martial arts films ever made. And I mean, my wife really loved this movie. She was really into it. She was really into the message, which is obviously one of empowerment, and Mulan gets treated with respect. But I don't know. Like, I feel like there's so many other movies that have done this kind of stuff better already. And I would watch the cartoon 10 times before I watched this movie again. And I would watch any other kind of wuxia martial arts film, which I thought did the action better than this movie did. And I was left pretty disappointed as well.
Yeah, I mean, somehow they managed to make a wuxia movie without any like actual fighting. Like I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's like, wow, who is this for? It's not for people who like martial arts movies. And it's not really for kids because there's too much fighting. Yeah. Although, I mean, my kids, well, they would have watched it, except it was boring and hard to follow. Like, that's the thing is these newer movies are overcomplicated. The original Mulan has all of the good messaging about empowerment, but it's very simple. That's actually a very, very simple movie. Like, in terms of like scene to scene progression, the number of characters, the number of things happening, very simple, stripped down story that lands. It sticks the landing perfectly. It's not my favorite Disney movie, but it's a solid animated Disney movie. This movie, they throw in other characters where it's like complicated relationships that you can't really track, and what's going on with who's this guy, and I mean, like I think I could recap all of the important things in the movie, but like that's because I'm an adult. I don't think a kid follows like what exactly is the deal with the sorceress. Like I get it. Of course I get it. I don't even think my 8-year-old really cared enough to get it. Like, sure, she probably could have got it if she was following the movie, honestly. But like it's just like, what is how is this speaking to the message of empowerment more clearly than the other movie already did? It's just not.
Well, I mean, and the choice to kind of make Mulan a superhero was interesting to me. And like, I think that the interesting thing about Mulan in the original was that like she's just not special in any way, really. She just like works her ass off and uses ingenuity to defeat her enemies, right?
Right.
And in this movie, they had to give her this special chi power that is like she's just better than everyone. And like I'm totally fine with her having magic powers, and that's cool and everything. But it does change the message a little bit. It's not necessarily about like her finding a way to succeed in a world that doesn't want anything to do with her, but it's like her getting to shine and getting to getting to express the power that she has always had inside, but society has forced her to kind of hide. And that's a different message, and it's a good message. I still like it. I don't quite find it in practice, in the actual beat by beat of the storytelling, as interesting to me, because she was just always kind of a badass, just always.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, I actually liked the addition of the new witch. I thought that was really interesting wrinkle. Like, she's someone who, like, life has beaten down to the point where she's almost given up, and like it's kind of like a version of Mulan's future, possibly.
I think I liked it as an adult, but disliked it as a person who was watching movie with my kids.
Sure.
Tuned into their frequency, because like the sorts of things that I was noticing was just like the first time Mulan does her like, she's like chasing the chicken or whatever. My 8-year-old daughter is like quite perplexed. Like, so Mulan has powers now, and I was like, yeah, it looks like Mulan has powers now, and you could just see the like. She didn't say it, but her entire affect was like, but why? And like that's sort of my question as well. Like
they turned it into a superhero origin story, which is fine. It's just different, and I don't know if it's better.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. My wife really loved this movie, and so I'm very happy for her. She really enjoyed it. It was fun to watch with her because she kept looking at me and saying, "Oh, Scott, I love this so much." And I just want to be like, "Okay, cool. Like, let me show you some other martial arts movies that I think you're going to really, really like." Because she hasn't seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I'm like, if you like this movie, you're going to fucking love Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I really think you are. And I think, like, if I'm trying to frame this in this way, I do think if there are some little kids out there who see this movie and are like, "Oh my God, I love this kind of martial arts," I think it could be a great gateway into exploring, Chinese martial arts films in a way that some kids have never done before. So that would be really cool. That would be really great.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Crouching Tiger was for my generation, I think, because I remember going to see that movie with a friend, and we had never seen anything like that. And we just we as soon as the flying started, we actually both just started like laughing with joy. If that it was weird. Like, it's not like we were like, this is dumb. It's like we were like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and it's so awesome that all I can do is like sort of laugh like a child with joy. Like, that's so yeah, I think it'll be good. It'll be good if this movie does that for this generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hope so.
Yeah.
All right. Another movie I wanted to talk about, Matt, is a movie called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And I'm going to try to talk about this movie without spoiling any of it. This is the new Charlie Kaufman movie. It is both written and directed by Charlie Kaufman. It is available on Netflix right now. And oh boy, it's a lot. It's a lot of a movie.
Is it a Charlie Kaufman movie?
It is indeed a Charlie Kaufman movie. This is, I think, probably one of his least accessible movies. It is a movie that is very difficult. It does not hold your hand. It does not give you any guidance. It just is itself, and you kind of have to figure it out. And a lot of people are not going to like this movie, and I totally understand why not. I fell in love with it. I really did. It was a movie where I watched, and I was like, huh. And then I've been thinking about it since that moment. Like, I have not stopped thinking about this movie and what it's doing. And I found it devastating. Like, this is like, it's so funny that we can't go see giant blockbusters in the theaters anymore because of this quarantine, but the movies that are still available to us to watch at home are the ones that rip our hearts out and step on them and then walk away. Like, this is, Charlie Kaufman has never been, I would call him an upbeat director. He is a person who I think puts a lot of his insecurities into his art, the way he feels. I mean, Adaptation is the most clear example of that, because he literally writes a character named after himself and makes him a completely neurotic, insecure kind of asshole. I think Charlie Kaufman is terrified that he's not a good person and that he's a jerk and that no one loves him. And I think that informs so much of everything he does, and this movie is no exception. It is is wonderfully directed. A lot of this movie just takes place in a car, two people driving in a car in a snowstorm, and like the cuts between different angles of these two characters in this very small space, I think is so intentional and so wonderful. The dialogue is, it has like, Charlie Kaufman can be pretty funny, you know? And it has some of that hilarity while also being just devastating. I don't know. I really do think that this is going to be one of those ones that people are going to be studying and thinking about for a long, long time. That like college film people are going to be writing like their thesis on this movie, and all the things it's doing. And I always leave these movies going like, I'm kind of worried about Charlie Kaufman, but like I think this is kind of his dream realized, because like he's been so frustrated with the industry, been so frustrated with with a Hollywood that never gives him the money or the space to create what he wants to create. And this is a movie in which Netflix gave him basically whatever he wanted. He wrote it, he directed it, he got to like, Netflix is like historically a very hands-off kind of film production company. They give you the money and they say, go, do what you want. And so he made this 2 hour and 15-minute film that is like quintessentially Kaufman. And I once again, a lot of people aren't going to like this. I honestly wasn't even sure I liked it until I thought about it for a week. And I think it's marvelous and horrible and devastating.
Yeah.
Jessie Buckley is the protagonist, and she is so good in this movie. She's absolutely incredible. I think I'm not sure if you would like this, Matt. I don't know.
I think everyone has a complicated relationship with Kaufman movies, because
Sure.
they're like, he's not really making them for you to like them.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking like, I just got through The Mist. I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for a new Charlie Kaufman movie, because they tend to be some of the most like requiring of soul searching to actually interpret and understand.
Yes. This is not an exception. I will say one of the interesting things that happened to me, when Adaptation, I list as one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think when I watched that movie originally, it spoke to me in a very personal way. I was a single guy when I watched it. I was very insecure about myself and about, is anyone going to ever love me? Am I good? Am I decent? Am I a type of person people like to be around? I had a lot of insecurities related to that. And this movie just spoke to me on that level. Like Adaptation rather. It just captured the feeling in my soul. And I found it this profound, moving experience. This movie, I think I'm in a much better place in my life, and I have much more confidence in myself and who I am and my ability to exist in this world. And so I found this movie devastating, and I found this movie like crushing, and I felt terrible, but it wasn't quite on the emotional, personal level. Like it wasn't reflecting on me and myself as much. I felt just a little bit removed from those feelings, more so than I have in some of Kaufman's previous movies. And I don't know if that's just a change in me as a person, as I've gone through my life watching Kaufman. I don't know, but that's how I felt watching this movie. And maybe that's because it's just not as good of a movie. I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to process through that. Or maybe it's just, again, me as a person have changed, and I've gotten to a place where I'm like, hey, I'm married. Like, women like me. I think I'm just more confident in my ability to, of who I am as a person, and in the value I bring to the world, and all these things. So that didn't speak to me on a personal level as much. But man, it still is powerful. Yeah,
I mean, I think even something like Being John Malkovich, where I don't really think there's too much of a level on which that personally connects to me, but it's still one where you're sort of processing it for the rest of your life. That's just the way he is as a writer and a storyteller. Where there's so much there that even if it's not your exact cup of tea. And again, like I think I'll definitely end up watching this and you say I might not like it. I'm like, well, I might not like it, but I'm sure I'll be thinking about it for a long time afterward in either case.
Yeah, I would love actually, if you watch it, us to come back and kind of try to pick the movie apart, because I think there's a lot of value of trying to process what is going on in this movie with someone else, because there's some things that I'm still kind of thinking about, and I've kind of intentionally avoided listening to other podcasts talking about this movie because I don't want their read of it to influence mine just yet. So maybe that'd be fun, like do like a little mini segment in the future once you watch it.
Yeah, I gonna be honest, I feel an actual visceral apprehension about watching this movie. Like I don't know if I need that in my life right now after having just watched The Mist. But
well, you can take a break. Take a break.
Take some time.
You don't have to leave this conversation and go watch it right away. Just take some time.
Go hug my children.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, the last movie I wanted to talk to you about, and this one will be quick, Matt, because this is a joke. So I was listening to a podcast last week, and they talked about a movie called Assassin 33 AD. And the thing that they said was extremists invent a time machine and go back in time to kill Jesus before the resurrection. Okay. And I was immediately like, what? I have to watch this right away. So I did that. So I went, it's on Amazon Prime right now, so I didn't have to spend any money on it, so I watched it. I will say up front here, this is a faith-based movie, right? So if you're worried about this like offending Christian sensibilities, it is a movie written with Christian sensibilities in mind. It is also one of the most racist things I've ever seen, in racist to God, every race, to black folks, to Arabic folks. Like, it's just awful. It's just legitimately awful. To Jewish people as well. Jesus. It's oh God, it's terrible. But it's also like one of the weirdest, most ambitious and ridiculous time travel movies I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, I just want to set a scene for you, Matt. Garden of Gethsemane, the night before the crucifixion. Armed people appear. One of them says, "That's him." They shoot Jesus Christ in the head and then go, "Bag him."
And is this played straight?
Yes.
Okay.
It is bonkers.
I don't know how to react to any of the things you're saying.
It is It is so bad. It is so awful. It is racist and terrible in all the worst ways. And bonkers. Like, this is a more confusing time travel movie than Primer. Matt, Primer. I have no idea what the fuck's going on. And that's probably because like they didn't bother to actually make like time travel rules in this movie that made any fucking sense. One of the characters ends up, I'm going to spoil something, but who cares? One of the characters ends up being one of the people nailed to the cross next to Jesus. You know the two criminals?
Okay.
Like, they end up being time travelers from the future.
Okay, this is genius. Loving this so far. Keep going.
Yeah, like
no?
the man that helps Jesus pick up the cross after he falls again is also a time traveler from the future. Jesus is sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane with a person from the future. He's talking in English, by the way, which is something they point out. It's like, how do we know Jesus is really the Son of God? Well, he's talking in English, and that language hasn't even been invented yet.
Fair enough.
And then the guy is like, I saw a bootleg of your movie, which was The Last Temptation of Christ, and they really hurt you, so don't do it. And then Jesus says at the end of the conversation, well, if you watched the end of my movie, you know I'll be back. Which means Jesus had seen The Last Temptation of Christ and also Terminator 2.
Yeah. I mean, depending on your theology, Jesus is God, and maybe just already, being omniscient, already knows every movie that will ever be made, and
it is absolutely
including this
bonkers.
one.
It is. So. I do not recommend it in any real kind of way. it is a movie that is one of those so bad it's good in some ways, while also, yes, I'm going to keep repeating this, it is one of the most racist things I've ever seen. I was appalled at times at just like how stereotypically awful they're being about all these characters. But also, it's nuts.
You know what, Scott? I don't know if I'm going to find the time to watch this one.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. I probably shouldn't have wasted my time. I got plenty of other stuff to do, but you know what? I did it.
Well, we appreciate your report.
Assassin 33 AD.
Uh-huh.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, that's it. I'm done. I promise.
Okay.
That is all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on anything we talked about today, on Mulan, on I'm Thinking of Ending Things, on Assassination 33 AD, or of course on The Mist and the Stephen King short story that went along with it, please feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find the aforementioned Kingslingers, our podcast where we are going through the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, chapter by chapter, a little bit each week. You can also head on over to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia, and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford to help ensure we keep growing and keep making new stuff. This episode is only possible thanks to the wonderful and generous donation by our patron, Byron. Byron, thank you so much. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for making me finally make Matt watch a Stephen King adaptation that he hadn't seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone over on the Kingslingers feed is going to be so happy.
I hope so.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That's right. And next week, Matt, we are celebrating our 100th episode, or at least our 100th episode of when we changed the name of the podcast. So, you know, it's our 100th episode, and we're going to celebrate. We're not going to do our normal review thing. I think we're just going to have a fun episode where we kind of take some time and look back over the things we've talked about over these past 100 episodes and talk about our favorites, talk about our favorite conversations and our favorite movies and all these things. I think it's just going to be a fun time where we just celebrate the fact that we've done 100 episodes of this thing.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yeah, so tune in for that next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.